Video games are defined more than any other entertainment medium by the hardware that they're released upon. Sometimes it's extremely clear cut, such as the very singular motion controls of the Nintendo Wii. Or it's just indicative, such as the incremental increase in graphical resolution across the last 5 console hardware generations. Differences between the major console systems within a generation usually pale in comparison to the variation in the PC gaming market. But the largest divide has to be between all of the above and the world of mobile gaming. Through the 2010s, 2 major ecosystems had emerged in the gaming market on mobile phones. The iOS system run by Apple, found across the iPhone series, and Android, an open source system co-sponsored by Google. At the very start of the decade, when Nintendo launched the 3DS in 2011, they were optimistically bullish about its chances of success, but were instead met with surprising customer resistance, prompting a significant price cut and several associated promotions. The PS Vita from Sony that followed shortly after faced similar issues and was widely regarded as a commercial failure. Analysts were extremely quick to suggest that, when looking for portable experiences, customers were turning to the low-price, disposable alternatives available on mobile phones. Indeed, at some point between 2012 and 2013, both the iOS and Google Play market individually overtook the video game optimized handheld market in terms of consumer spending. Although the 3DS largely recovered thanks to Nintendo's responsive action, the low uptake of the Wii U console meant that a company, which had previously been buoyant with the dual success of the Wii and DS series, was now considered in dire straits. For years they had insisted that their software was proprietary, and they'd taken pride that their IP could only be found on Nintendo hardware. Now that their hardware was struggling, there were 2 rational responses. Hold on to that philosophy because it was their main remaining selling point, or, as the increasingly loud, critical voices of their angry shareholders demanded, try and use that IP to get some increased leverage to resolve the cash flow problems. Putting Mario on the PlayStation or Xbox consoles would effectively mean admitting defeat and permanently kill their own console. But perhaps the mobile phone market was distinct enough not to compete with themselves. President Satoru Iwata himself protested for years, stating that should Nintendo move to other people's hardware, it would be the first step towards losing their identity. However, by 2014, a $240 million financial loss was causing even him to reconsider his stance. In 2015, Nintendo announced that they had entered a partnership with mobile developer DeNA and had agreed to 5 titles to test the market. Rather than just port their old games, the company wanted to provide more interesting experiences that would bring their IP to brand new audiences, using mobile phones as a marketing tool to bring new customers towards their hardware. It took longer than expected for these games to come out, with only 2 of the 5 initially proposed arriving in the following year of 2016, and a third surprise success arrived in the shape of Niantic's spin-off Pokemon Go. The freemium geolocation game was a runaway hit, popularising a whole new format of mobile games and boosting Nintendo's share price significantly. However, many of the speculators did not realise that only a portion of the profits went to Nintendo, as the majority stake in the game was held by the developer Niantic and then the Pokemon Company, who are a separate entity. 5 months after Pokemon Go's release, Nintendo released their second DeNA game. The first, Miitomo, had just been an excuse to test the water and extrapolate on their Mii architecture. It was the second where they expected to make their money. It was here, finally, after all the years of denying even the thought that it could happen, that they were putting their most sacred franchise forwards. Miyamoto himself got involved in the game's development, the first time he had been hands-on with the franchise since the first Super Mario Galaxy. It had to be simple to pick up and play, but difficult to master. And so the team settled upon this interesting auto-runner that combined traditional Mario side-scrolling with a single-button control scheme. The idea is devilishly simple. Mario will always run from left to right. He will hop or leap over most enemies so the only real challenge is avoiding pits or lava. Where the player will be tested, however, is collecting all the red coins that lie scattered throughout the levels, some of which require expert timing to reach, and as the player cannot turn around or stop, this experience is simultaneously completely unlike any other Super Mario experience, whilst also retaining the inventive charm that made the franchise so exciting in the first place. But the thing that raised eyebrows was the unsurprisingly conservative decision Nintendo made about the pricing structure. Because the thing about the mobile phone gaming market that distinguishes it even more from other console experiences is just how disposable everything on it feels. The vast majority of games on the App Store are free, supported by rampant advertising and additional purchases galore. Despite protestations to the contrary, the entire market is pre-dedicated on the concept of what they call a white whale customer. Players who will find a title that they like and shovel money into it to prolong the experience without thinking. So many games in this architecture are designed to be addictive, with attention-seeking reward mechanisms built into the very game design from the start. When done well, it can be brilliant. It can be a great reward system where players can give money back to good developers to say thank you for providing me a quality experience that I want more of. However, I'm not surprised that Nintendo looked at this and they felt uncomfortable about sending Mario off in that direction. There is something predatory about the design. There are too many stories about children unwarily shoveling fortunes into their favourite games, or developers boasting about methods to increase the addictiveness of their reward mechanics. The mentality that would lead to the loot box epidemic was already well underway and taking shape. This is driven, however, by a market that has an inbuilt unwillingness to tolerate games with a hard paywall, where progression becomes impossible without an in-app purchase. Mario Run was profitable, but it wasn't the success that Nintendo expected, or even that the Mario brand demanded it should have been. The fault for this lies squarely at Nintendo's door, because consumer demand was clearly there. Super Mario Run was the most downloaded game for Android systems in 2017, but players were just unwilling to part with their wallets. Nintendo settled upon a fixed, one-off, mandatory $10 purchase for players to advance past the second level. The control scheme may have been simple, but the levels were designed to be complicated and required advanced understanding of Mario's movement capability to flourish. It's a brilliant bit of Nintendo design, but a very poor, addictive experience. And as is my policy, not to pay money to mobile phone game developers, one I am never going to complete. I've only ever put money forwards to one mobile phone game developer, and I promise it's not a game anyone would ever be able to guess. But the free section of Mario Run was a fun diversion. I can see the intelligence in the design, and the later edition of the Remix 10 mode allowed for a hint of what was to come if you'd stuck with it. I often wonder about the morality of downloading video games from a developer who put hours and years of its team's lives into preparing when you have no intention of paying them anything at any point. When there are in-game advertisements, I consider it perfectly sound, but Nintendo was so naive in the way that they approached this one. They clearly expected their audience to do what they always did, but the moment they stepped off their own proprietary hardware, they lost control without realising it. I would recommend anyone interested though to check out this mobile phone oddity. There are very few experiences on the iOS and Android mobile markets that I can uncynically say provide me with a solid experience, actually have depth in their replayability, don't feel aggressive in how they push monetization, and actually provide a good time. Nintendo learnt lessons from how this game was received, and they dramatically changed their approach for future mobile phone games, making them all far more profitable, but for me, far less interesting.